Hello, I'm Richard Gisbert, and you're at The Listening Post. This week, the Gaza Flotilla and the media war that comes with it.
We cannot afford to outsource Israel's security.
The door to Damascus cracks open.
We're amongst the first group of foreign journalists to be allowed in here in over 3 months.
The media get back into Syria. The Middle East Media Research Institute, an Israeli organization that tries to set the coverage agenda. And the latest unlikely YouTube celebrity is a Jamaican relief worker.
Right now, nobody can cross it.
He's our web video of the week.
We are around to help them.
Is it a humanitarian mission or an exercise in political public relations? The truth is, it's a bit of both. The idea behind the Freedom Flotilla is to ship aid to Palestinians who live behind the blockade in Gaza. However, the convoy also wants to deliver a message through the global media to the international community about the ongoing siege of the Strip. Just over a year ago, when the Israeli military stormed the aid ship, the MEMRI, 9 of those on board were killed. There was condemnation, including from one of the few Muslim countries Israel was on speaking terms with, Turkey. This time around, the Israelis are taking the flotilla very seriously. The government and its slick media machine did not even wait for the ships to set sail before they began pushing their side of the story. Our starting point this week is the convoy's primary port of embarkation, Athens, and the story that will land Gaza where the activists on board want to see it in the headlines.
A flotilla carrying humanitarian aid bound for Gaza is set to depart from Greece.
It is absolutely about media attention of the world about what the Israelis are doing to the people of Gaza.
The idea of the people in the flotilla is to wake up the attention of the media again.
The Israeli government, for their side, are also using this event for their own PR. In controlling the narrative of the Israeli-Palestinian conflict.
How does a government control the reporting of a story that is yet to happen? In this case, Israel's military has been posting videos explaining its blockade of Gaza.
One of the main ways that Hamas receives powerful weapons to use against Israel is via the sea.
We have seen enough examples of how the sea is being used as a means for smuggling mass amounts of weaponry.
Israeli media have been reporting stories attributed to domestic intelligence sources. They claim the activists could be carrying chemical weapons to use against Israeli soldiers. The result? Headlines like lethal acid on flotilla boat and flotilla activists set to kill.
The Israeli government is trying to scare its own soldiers. I myself was a soldier. For 29 years I was in the U.S. military. And I know how scared these young kids can be with a rifle in their hand, and they're being told that I, a retired Army colonel, am going to throw chemicals on another soldier. No, I'm not doing that, and no one in our flotilla is. So I call on the government of Israel to stop this very dangerous propaganda they're doing to their own people.
And the Israeli government tried to plant fear in the media. On the 26th of June, the government's press office warned that any journalist on a flotilla ship would be banned from Israel for 10 years. The Association for Foreign Reporters in Israel called that a chilling message that raised serious questions about Israel's commitment to freedom of the press. Within 24 hours, the government rescinded the ban.
Basically, what you have here is a balance inside Israel. On the one hand, they on no account want foreign media to be able to follow what exactly is happening on board, and they don't really want media coverage that's sympathetic to the flotilla. On the other hand, if they cross a line, a border of freedom of speech and freedom of the press, they're going to be counterproductive. It's going to be an own goal, and that in fact is what happened in this case.
My question is if they don't want the media covering the flotilla, then why would they draw media attention to the flotilla by issuing a ban against covering it? I mean, immediately the media then starts talking about that ban.
Both sides in this propaganda battle have learned from what happened last time, when the Israeli military stormed the MEMRI, killed 9 people, locked up the rest for 3 days, and confiscated every camera and piece of video footage they could find on board.
The country's military has been quick to broadcast its version of events.
For 72 hours, 3 entire news cycles, the only video the global media had to tell the story was 2 minutes supplied by the military, edited and illustrated to back back Israel's version of what happened.
The Israeli Navy claims self-defense, releasing this video to support their case.
Israel's desire to control all of the footage and all of the information about the flotilla falls in line with their decision to threaten and intimidate journalists. And it's clear that they are playing a game about controlling the narrative of these ships.
The people who have the footage and the ability to interpret that footage, they are the ones who have the upper hand.
And I'd urge people just to look at the videos that have been released. You see clearly the violence from those hardcore activists on the boat.
And so for the Israelis, it was very important to get every single last bit of footage and interpretation of that footage and to keep it.
The aggression, the violence, the attacks from the people on the boat on our servicemen was something that was enormous.
The Israelis consider a camera a weapon. And those weapons that are merely just cameras, recording what Israel is doing, they consider very dangerous.
3 of the 9 people killed on the Mavi Marmara were journalists, something that every reporter on this flotilla must be mindful of.
The journalists on board, myself included, are preparing for all scenarios. We are clearly marking ourselves as journalists. Our mission is clear and transparent, and so we're taking every effort to protect ourselves by marking ourselves and by doing our jobs.
I'm very much considering how I will conduct myself as a journalist and how that's going to look from the outside. I'm very concerned that holding a camera in my hand could look, to an Israeli soldier, a camera can be something that there could be a gun hidden on the inside. And I think also the Israeli government finds the press to be very threatening. So I think that I will probably not take any stills as the soldiers are boarding. I might even put my notebook down, and just do my best to look totally approachable and, not offer any resistance.
Hi, I'm Mark.
Without a doubt, the oddest angle to the flotilla story was this YouTube video. A self-described American gay activist who said he and his group wanted to join the flotilla, but were told by organizers they were not welcome.
Since it would not be in the overall interests of the flotilla. I was surprised and a bit insulted.
The clip goes on to show links between the organizers and Hamas leaders. However, the video was not what it claimed to be. The American who called himself Mark Pax is actually an Israeli actor named Omer Gershon.
The next question was, who had encouraged him to make such a video, and how was it disseminated? So it was disseminated on the Twitter accounts of the Israeli government offices, and later on more and more of the IDF spokesperson channels. And in the event, what transpired later was it seems that actually it's the Israeli government that had also promoted the making of the video. They refused to deny this when they were asked.
Israel's heavy-handed threat to ban flotilla journalists lasted all of one day. The chemical weapons story convinced few, apart from some Israeli headline writers. And the hoax video had the government's fingerprints all over it. Israel's vaunted media machine has had a bad week. However, if commandos storm the flotilla ships once again, sweep up all the video once again, and the global media run with the Israeli version of events once again,
sailors attacked by club-wielding activists,
none of that will really matter. Our Global Village voice is now on the media side of the flotilla story.
The Gaza Flotilla aims to promote freedom for the Palestinian people and an end to the occupation of Gaza. But in a recent New York Times story on the flotilla, Jerusalem Bureau Chief Ethan Bronner never once even used the word occupation or mentioned the flotilla's goal of freedom for the Palestinians. Furthermore, Bronner repeated Israel's talking points. So long as this blatant bias remains endemic in the mainstream U.S. media, the Gaza Flotilla activists have no chance of getting their message out accurately to the American public.
Israel and the United States' approach seems to be keeping the focus on the flotilla rather than on the blockade of Gaza, making the flotilla the story. And in this redirection of the story, they seem to have been pretty successful thus far in the U.S. corporate media.
Israel's public response is to go on the media offensive this time ahead of any protests. The news is reading from the same script across the board here in the U.S., a narrative pro-Israel and one-sided. Misinformation is being presented as fact, and background on Israel itself is omitted quite often. Also, the opinions of the Israeli people, separate from the Israeli government, is noticeably absent.
Time now for Listening Post News Bites. There's been a change in policy in Damascus. The authorities in Syria have allowed some of the mainstream media back into the country to report on the story there. President Bashar al-Assad's government locked most of the international media out of Syria once the protests began in March, leaving journalists to rely heavily on social media for information. With the narrative being shaped by activists, the picture painted was of widespread anti-government demonstrations and brutal security crackdowns. When reporters from CNN and Britain's Sky News got to the country's capital, they told a somewhat different story.
We saw Friday prayers end at the Grand Umayyad Mosque, and a very peaceful event it was.
And in this part of Damascus, at least, he seems to enjoy public support.
However, those journalists say they were tended to by government minders, their movements were strictly limited, and they never got to areas where citizen journalists were reporting about protests on that very same day. It's been 6 months since the fall of the Ben Ali regime in Tunisia, and the new government is getting a failing grade over the issue of media reform. The Paris-based media watchdog group Reporters Without Borders has taken the government to task for failing to issue a single new broadcast license so far. Radio stations which operated clandestinely during the Ben Ali era and were instrumental in the fall of the regime, stations like Radio Kalama and Radio 6, have yet to be licensed. On June 21st, the head of Radio Kalama, Omar Mestidi, who we've interviewed here at the Listening Post, announced he was starting a hunger strike to protest the new government's failure to keep its promises. Reporters Without Borders has said, "We know that a transition of this scale cannot happen overnight, but the absence of media freedom was one of the leading characteristics of the old regime, and there is an urgent need for a complete break with this sad heritage." A Chinese journalist about to be released after nearly 4 years in jail has been sentenced on the eve of his release to another 8 years in prison. Chi Chong-wai is an investigative reporter who was initially sentenced in 2008 after he wrote about a local government official beating a female employee for being late for work. Having done that time, he then got the additional sentence for extortion, blackmail, and fraud, even though his lawyers say the prosecutors introduced no new evidence. Chi's wife has reportedly said her husband has been beaten almost daily and that the authorities re-sentenced him for fear that if released, he would disclose the identities of those who mistreated him. The lawyers are appealing, and the International Federation of Journalists has taken up the case condemning Beijing's punitive tactics against Chi and other Chinese journalists. Google admits it's an incomplete picture. However, the company says that the U.S. government asks more than twice as often for private user information than any other government. It's the first time that Google has published this kind of data. It was included in the search giant's biannual transparency report, and it relates to the second half of the year 2010. The report says that Washington made 4,601 data requests in those 6 months. Google says it complied 94% of the time. In second place with 1,804 requests was Brazil, and in third place with 1,699 was India. Absent from the list was China. According to Google, Beijing considers censorship demands a state secret, so the company could not disclose any of that information. The report comes just days after Google was subpoenaed by the U.S.'s Federal Trade Commission. The FTC is investigating whether Google has abused its dominant position to direct users to its own sites and services. Back to the Israel-Palestine story now. One of the most useful weapons Israel has at its disposal in the never-ending propaganda battle over the Mideast conflict is not even in Israel. The Middle East Media Research Institute, MEMRI for short, is based in Washington, D.C. And chances are some of MEMRI's work may have landed in your inbox. MEMRI monitors primarily Arabic language television broadcasts, then it links to some video clips, provides translations, and sends them out to media organizations. The links show anything from fiery Muslim clerics making controversial pronouncements to Palestinian cartoon characters attacking the state of Israel. And those video clips have been featured on just about every major news network in the United States. MEMRI's stated goal is to bridge the language gap and to inform. It sounds noble enough, but critics say MEMRI's motives are purely political. The Listening Post's Meenakshi Ravi now on an organization that's out to influence how the Middle East is seen in the rest of the world's media.
Since 1998, a Washington, D.C. based organization called MEMRI has been making a big impact on how the Middle East is perceived in Western media. You may not have heard of them, but chances are you know their work. You've seen it on CNN.
A man with what seems to be an American accent, training with a Taliban-style group in Somalia.
Fox News.
A cleric and former diplomat at the Saudi embassy here in Washington says Mickey Mouse should be killed.
Sky.
Mickey Mouse is a soldier of Satan.
NBC.
The message to kids is very clear. America is the enemy.
And CBS.
On your state-controlled television.
MEMRI is a translation service, essentially. It sort of gives you the Middle East through the media of the Middle East. Television shows, debates, sometimes sermons in mosques.
They even monitor and translate criticism of their own organization.
جاء موقع MEMRI.net هذا موقع يهودي يقوم عليه ضابط موساد يرصد ما يقول حتى برنامج البينة هذا تبعك هذا برنامج مرصود وتؤخذ منه مقاطع تعرض.
Well, MEMRI is an organization that was established supposedly to bridge the gap of language between the Arab world and other countries and the West. If that's what it is, then this is a great service, but it's not, because in fact it's really involved in selective process. In my opinion, the name should be changed to selective memory.
هؤلاء يعانوا من حالة نفسية مضطربة لأنهم هم سارقون هم معتدون.
It cherry picks items from the Muslim and Arab world designed to make Muslims and Arabs look inherently violent and irrational. So they have every right to do this kind of thing, but I don't think anybody should be fooled that MEMRI is anything but what it is. It's really a propaganda machine for the most extreme wing of the Israeli political spectrum.
MEMRI's co-founder and president, Colonel Yigal Karman, spent more than 20 years in Israeli intelligence. We only know this because when MEMRI's website launched in the late 90s, Karman's military intelligence credentials were a prominent part of his bio. They've since been scrubbed from the site, along with the statement that MEMRI's research emphasizes the continuing relevance of Zionism to the Jewish people and to the State of Israel.
I know the founder and leader of MEMRI pretty well, Yigal Karman. He's a very humane man, an erudite man, a cultured man, who knows a lot about the Middle East and cares a lot about the Middle East. He wants to bring the Middle East to light. He wants to let others in the world know what's going on, what's being said, what's being aired. Otherwise, we're in the dark.
For an organization that operates in the U.S. as a tax-exempt charity devoted to educating the public about the Middle East, MEMRI is not very interested in educating the public about its organization. We contacted MEMRI in the hopes of speaking with Mr. Karman. Neither he nor anyone else from MEMRI would agree to an interview.
The people involved with MEMRI are some of the infamous Islamophobes and pro-Israel extremists like Buck Revell, Elliot Abrams, Stephen Emerson, all of these people, extremists in favor of any policy put forward by the State of Israel and anything that will make Islam and Muslims look inherently dangerous and irrational.
Although MEMRI occasionally posts video that highlights moderate voices and political reformers, these don't garner as much attention from mainstream media as the more colorful clips.
You're talking about fringe elements. Of course, you got the Hamas station Al-Aqsa, and you have other stations which has established a major reputation like Jazeera, Al-Arabiya. So you cannot put those stories coming from Al-Aqsa forward and say, this is a representation of the Arab world. It's not.
MEMRI has a very subtle but deep influence with media around the world. When they don't have any other access to translations, MEMRI is often the only source.
In the U.S., there is a major difference between CNN, Fox, MSNBC, and so on. But when it comes to a story or a clip fed to them by MEMRI, they all seem to jump on the bandwagon without questioning the source, without questioning the facts, without questioning the translation of the material.
Anti-Israel. Well, it's had a big impact, certainly on journalists like me, It has made us smarter about the Middle East. It has allowed us to see and hear what Middle Eastern leaders are saying to their own people in their own tongues.
لا أتصور أن نستغرق أكثر من 11 يوما لمحو إسرائيل عن الوجود.
It's a little like somebody in Iran translating the American media into Farsi, but only selecting stories that have to do with domestic abuse. Would the translations be accurate? Would it really matter?
While MEMRI's video clips may not be representative, that does not mean they're unimportant.
Look, I have no problem of anyone showing any kind of egregious moments. I'm not saying that you don't have these kind of stories or they don't happen. I'm questioning the motives and the agenda.
We can't be sure what MEMRI's motives are, but given the fact that they have a member of staff devoted to liaising with the American government, it's clear that their agenda includes becoming a go-to source for Washington officials on the rhetoric of the Middle East, so long as their definition of Middle East doesn't include Israel.
MEMRI pays Middle Easterners the compliment of listening to what they say and taking what they say seriously. I'll often hear from Westerners, well, you know, the Arabs, the Iranians, and others in the Middle East, they're hot-headed, they're overheated, they're emotional, they're hyperbolic. You know, you really shouldn't listen to what they say. And this is a very condescending attitude, I think.
We can criticize MEMRI, but until somebody comes up with an alternative that offers a balanced and accurate portrayal of the Muslim world, you know, people are going to be stuck with MEMRI.
More Global Village Voices now on MEMRI and Media Spin.
Journalists lack regional expertise and especially lack linguistic skills. They lack knowledge of Arabic, Urdu, Farsi, etc. So they rely on translation services. In the case of Arabic, MEMRI is one of these primary services.
It often takes out of context translations and say this is the truth. For example, there is a talk show on Jazeera between a hardcore Islamist and the liberal, MEMRI will only take the Islamist, translate what he says, and send it to the US media.
MEMRI has now become a major, if not the major news source about the geographical region of Islam, which is a far more diverse, far more complex region than just the Middle East. If the Middle East only heard about the United States through networks like Fox News or through Fox News pundits, would this be an accurate representation of public opinion in the United States?
Finally, our web video of the week, the story of Clifton Brown. Brown was a totally anonymous relief worker from a place called Robertsfield, Jamaica. He was working to help people get across a flooded river, and he did a television interview. Then some guy named DJ Powa took that clip, remixed it, auto-tuned it, and 500,000 hits later, Clifton Brown, the guy in the hard hat, is negotiating an endorsement deal with a Jamaican mobile phone company. That's the thing about the World Wide Web. All the web's a stage, and you never know who's going to step into the spotlight. We'll see you next time at The Listening Post.
3 miles down the road is the Yalas River. Residents were forced to pay between $250 and $500 to cross, as transportation was restricted to either a heavy-duty vehicle or being lifted across.
Right now, nobody can cross it. It's only who can understand it. Cross it. Nobody can cross it. It's only fisherman and a fisherwoman. Just me. Nobody can cross it. It's only who can manage the water. It's only something them come over. Or if we around to help them.
Not all the vehicles
can cross it.
This vehicle
can cross it. We lock away in the wilderness. Nobody cross it. Cross. Yesterday, the bus was coming from town. A bus to the people. Just the mercy of God. Why the bus don't go over? The bus can't swim.
The bus can't swim.
The bus can't swim.
Believe it or not.
The bus can't swim. Yesterday, the bus was coming from town. The bus can't cross it. The last time, hurricane, dead up to bury up the top.
Nobody no for walk.
The bus can't swim.
Nobody no for walk.
The bus can't cross it. Nobody can cross it. It's only who can understand it. Cross it. Nobody can cross it. It's only fisherman and a fisherwoman. Just me. Nobody can cross it. It's only who can manage the water. It's only something them come over. Or if we around to help them. Nobody can cross it. Nobody cross it. It's only who can swim. Cross it. Cross it. Cross. Nobody cross it.